Hi, Sherry.
Hi, Mary.
I don't know about you, but I loved that video trailer. It was a great teaser.
I know
It's like exactly
that
as I
was so
imagined
great
it
with the
to
whole
be.
underground. Yeah, the parking garage and the kid and everything. It was so cool. I wasn't expecting that.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, welcome to everybody that's joining us today. I'm Mary Kubica, author of 10 suspense novels, including my next book, It's Not Her, which will be out in February of 2026. And I am joined here today with Shari Lapena, who is the #1 internationally best-selling author of 9 suspense novels, including her latest, She Didn't See It Coming, which is absolutely phenomenal. And I'm so excited to talk about it today. Sherry is a former lawyer and English teacher. She now writes full-time from a farm in Ontario where she lives with her husband. So welcome, Sherry. This book is
Thank you, Mary.
it's incredible. I mean, like all of your books, it's such a page turner. It's one of those that's absolutely impossible to put down, just one more chapter until before you know it, you've read the whole book. The characters they're so magnetic. They really draw you in. And there's just, I don't know, so many great things about it. And everybody out there who hasn't had a chance to read it yet, they're in for a treat. So to start with, Sherry, do you want to tell us a little bit about this book?
Sure. This book is about a woman who doesn't show up to pick up her 3-year-old from daycare one afternoon. So she decided that day to work from home, and she and her husband and their child live in a condominium apartment, a nice one. And she decided to work from home that day, and her husband gets a call from the daycare saying that she didn't show up, which is very, strange behavior. And so the husband picks up the child and he comes back home and he sees her car in the parking garage where it's usually parked. He goes upstairs and he finds her computer is there, left open and on, and her purse is on the side table in the hall, and her keys are there, her phone is there. And it looks like she just stepped out for a minute. Um, but they can't figure out where she's gone. And so they have to start looking for her, and the police become involved. And it was inspired by these stories that you hear about people who just go out to the corner store to get something one day and they're never seen again. And I've always found there's something about someone disappearing that's even sort of more interesting in a way than finding a body, because you just don't know what's happened to them. So you're so curious to know.
Right.
So that's the start of the book. And
Yeah, I
then
love
there's
it.
a
Go ahead.
and then
I was
there's
gonna
this, of
say,
course, this unraveling of everybody, because it's the people left behind that are so interesting too. Because, if someone in your life that you think is perfectly happy and you have a normal life, if they just disappear, you don't know if they've just walked away on their own. There's no sign of a struggle in the apartment. There's no sign of foul play. Um, it looks like she maybe just walked down the stairwell and hit her head or something. And so they have to search the whole building. And as the search goes on, they sort of realize that there's no evidence that she actually ever left the building. So then the question is she somewhere in the building? Is she inside one of these apartments that they can't get inside because they don't have probable cause for a search warrant? So it's a very tense kind of search, to find her, and the clock is ticking, and it's a very sort of enmeshed uh, neighborhood because they're all on top of each other in a condominium building, right? The neighbors were even closer than they are in my usual cul-de-sac. So
yeah,
I had a lot of fun with the setting in
yeah,
this one, the setup.
yeah. Well, and that was one of my questions that I had for you because the setting right away jumped out to me. And the whole premise here, it's so like ripped from the headlines. I feel like we hear quite often about someone who's missing, they, like you said, they didn't pick up their child from daycare, or just someone who went out to run an errand and didn't come back. And I do like it as opposed to finding a body, because we don't know if
Mhm.
something has happened to her, if she's dead or if she's alive, if she has just, if she's been kidnapped, or if she's wandered away from her own life. So there are so many
Mhm.
possibilities there when the story begins, and I love that, because as a reader of this kind of genre, your wheels are instantly spinning trying to figure out what has happened. But the setting really stood out to me. Most of your books are set in this, kind of idyllic suburban neighborhood. And they're always, to me, many of your books are so like, they're these nice areas where you don't think so much that bad things can happen. And really the same is true of this luxury condominium building. You know, it's an upscale place, but the setting becomes so claustrophobic in a sense. And it's sort of like a locked room mystery because, like you said, as they start to realize she may have not left, it just really, I got chills kind of when I started to discover some of those things. And it really, ups the ante when you're trying to figure out what happened. What inspired you to use this for your setting for the book?
Well, to be honest, have you heard of the Alyssa Lamb case? It's a it's a famous case about a woman, it turned out to be a Canadian woman, who went missing in a big hotel. I think it was the Chelsea Hotel. And they didn't think she'd left the building, but they couldn't find her in the building. And it took them more than a couple of weeks. And they finally found her in the water tanks up on the roof. A similar case where the woman's in the building, no sign really that she left or no evidence that she left. They had a creepy video of her behaving oddly in the elevator. And all these online sleuths got involved trying to figure out what had happened, which sort of inspired the whole online sleuthing part of my book. So that case was I saw a documentary on it, and that kind of got my wheels turning. Because that was a really interesting one. We still don't know how she could have gotten into the water tank on top of the building herself. So I wanted something like that where it was just couldn't find her in the building. And of course, the people left behind, then you get to have the fun of figuring out who are these people left behind, having to live with this mystery of what happened to her. So that was fun, adding in characters, trying to figure out what they might or might not have had to do with it too.
For sure. Yeah, so good. I saw in the comments someone popped up that the documentary was so good and it was phenomenal. Yeah. I'm guessing you and I both, and pretty much many of the members joining us today, are all true crime junkies. So this will speak right to all of you. Along the same lines, I stole a Claire McIntosh quote. She said, "Shari Lapena is the undisputed queen of dysfunctional families," which I love, and I feel like it's so true. And the family in here is really no different. We definitely have different connections here. And there's a best friend involved and just, different connections. But what draws you to these types of characters, these types of friendships and marriages and things like that?
I just love a dysfunctional family. I just think they're really interesting because, you think your family knows you really well. And, it feels so intimate and so on. But these are the people that are keeping secrets from each other. So it's just kind of levels it up a bit to me. I mean, if you have a work person you work with or a neighbor that's sort of, not as closely, intimately connected to you, then the stakes don't feel as high for me. For me, the stakes are higher the closer the relationship between the victim and the possible perpetrator, the higher the stakes. For the reader, too. I mean,
For sure.
And I just love family dynamics because family dynamics are fascinating. Like every family is different in their own way. They're all messed up in their own way, which is, endless material.
It's so true. And I think that they're relatable because, to your point, there are so many dysfunctional families and things like that, so it's nice. It's also that sort of like you don't necessarily know everything about the people closest to you. And I think that's good to know. And then just the fact that, so many people are likely to be hurt by somebody that they know versus a stranger. So I think that just really draws from reality too, which I love. We have gotten so many audience questions that were submitted in advance when you registered, which that has made my job so easy. So thank you to all of you who submitted questions. But I want to go through some of those. Sticking with the idea of characters first, Courtney asked, do you identify with one character in particular in your new release?
No, I think I sort of get equally into the heads of all my characters. I like to get really deep into their heads, but do I identify with any of them? Not so much. Maybe the grandmother who's really worried about what's going to happen to that young child without a mother. Maybe it's the stage of life I'm at. I don't know. Maybe her. Because she's thinking, it's not a spoiler to say that the husband becomes a suspect because, the husband will always be a suspect. But there are a number of suspects in this book. And the grandmother is worried about what might happen to the 3-year-old whose mother has disappeared. So, I kind of identify with her.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that when you have that emotional connection, like you said, you can understand why she's feeling the way she is. And a reader having that emotional connection with the character is that one of those things that just really draws you into the book. And so that grandmother, yeah, of course, we're going to feel really worried and sorry for this child growing up without a mother. So that really draws us in that much more. Candace asks, what is the process for developing the characters for you?
I don't try and learn anything about my characters beforehand. I don't do any kind of planning of their likes and their dislikes or anything like that. All I do is I start with my premise or my situation, and I get inside the character's head and I take it from there. So when I started this book, it was, she was driving to work. Sorry, Bryden was driving to work. Oh, driving to daycare in the prologue. And I just got into her head, what she was thinking about. I got into her feelings about her daughter, her little orchid child. And then when she hits the car in front of her and how she reacted to this man who, she had an interesting reaction to this man with whom she had the fender bender. And he comes back. And so I just basically start and I see how she reacts. Like she hits a car. And what does she do then? Like, how does she react to him? How do they do this little, like he's interesting and attractive, but he's also a bit edgy. And so I organically create the characters through what they're experiencing and who they meet and what they do. I just get in their heads and grow from there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm very similar actually. And I love that just the, like you said, organic way that you are creating these relationships between yourself and these characters. And it just really grows naturally and you get to know them page by page. And like I said, I do that too. And it just feels like a really authentic way to get to know the characters instead of sort of like predetermining who they're going to be.
I think so. I think you have to sort of put your character in a situation and see how they develop. And that way, that's how you get the authentic characters. I agree.
Right. And you find that they surprise you sometimes.
They do.
Lori asks, whether in She Didn't See It Coming or any of your books, but what has been the most challenging character for you to write and why?
Oh, I, I don't really, it sounds weird, but I don't really find any of them more challenging than others. I kind of get into their heads, and if they don't speak to me, if they don't grow and develop, then I drop them and the story goes in a different direction. That doesn't happen very often, but I will say that Avery, and everyone here is lying, I did struggle a bit with the 9-year-old and getting that right. That child who has some mental illness or disorder, and getting the age, because she's super bright, but she's still only 9 and she's got this conduct disorder. So she was a bit more of a struggle. She required some research, which most of my characters don't at all. So maybe her.
Yeah, okay, that totally makes sense. I feel like, of course, all the characters are fictional, but when they're more removed from who you are, it's sort of harder to really get a sense sometimes for who they are.
Yeah.
Anne asks, stepping away from characters, but how did you come up with the title for this book?
Oh, good question. It wasn't me. I think it's usually a group effort. We, everybody from marketing and the agents and publishers, everybody, we just start to spin possible titles. And I think my English editor came up with this one. I'm not sure. But when we hit it, we thought, oh, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
You just know when
titles are hard,
right?
Yeah. Titles are hard.
They're so hard. And I don't know about you, but I think I always thought that just every author came up with their own titles until I actually got into publishing. And I think like maybe one title that I have suggested out of 10 books stuck. But there are just so many more people involved. And it's great to get, sales and marketing and publicity and everybody's take on it because everybody's sort of looking at it from a different perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And usually like by the time we come up with the title, I'm so sick of the book.
I don't care, just anything. Do you bother with like a working title when you're writing it, or is it just book 10, book 9?
It's always book 9, book 10. This one was book 9 and the next one was book 10. But yeah, that's what I do.
You and I are very similar, Shari.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, let's talk about cover design for a minute, which this cover is absolutely phenomenal. just
Isn't it
colors
stunning?
that they use. I mean, they just did such a great job. And the looking into the condominium and all of that. How does that process work for you?
I don't have anything to do with that except they come up with something and then they show me what it looks like. And I saw that and I just loved it because it's sort of ominous and it's got all those candy colors. Like the more you look into it, the more interesting it becomes. It's got all those sort of jewel colors and so it's sort of like candy, but it's sort of dark. It's really dark. So I just loved it. I just right from the get-go, I loved it.
So do they just show you like one image and you're like, that's it, that's the one, and it's done? Or are there other images that you look at?
I think it depends. I mean, we start with I think they come up with one, and if I love it, that's it. If I don't love it, then we'll come up with others. And then in the UK always has a different cover. Same thing. They'll come up with an image, and we might change it a little bit or tweak it, or it might be exactly right. Or yeah. It just
Yeah.
it's a collaborative thing. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
Well, they do a great job. And I was on your website earlier
yeah.
today, and there was a page where you list all your thriller books, and so I could see all the covers together, and they just all work so well together, which I think is
They
is
do. Yeah, they
yeah,
look really
yeah.
pretty together, and they've just done a new a thing with the paperback. I look at the backlist. So all the paperbacks all have the same. They have a color strip down the side, and they just look amazing all together. So
Yeah,
they're sort of instantly recognizable as part of a backlist.
for sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really pleased with
I
that.
love that. Yeah, they did a great job. Going back to inspiration, we talked about the inspiration for this book, but both Libby and Tammy had sent in questions just about sort of like inspiration in general. Where do you get your inspiration for your ideas? Is it, things that you watch or listen to, or do you just dream them up?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I mean, this one was a little bit inspired by the documentary about Elsa Lam. Um, the one that I just handed in, I couldn't tell you what inspired that because I don't remember. My one before this, What Have You Done, was inspired by seeing a bunch of vultures over a carcass in a field, a deer carcass in a field. So sometimes it's something that I see, sometimes it's something I read in the newspaper, a true crime. But I never do something that's based on a true crime that's very current and people are involved. There's a great true crime near here that I would love to do, but I won't do because it's too raw for people.
Sure. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And
Yeah,
I think a lot of your readers and just society, it probably appreciates that very much because they agree that
yeah,
there are times that it's too soon to be
yeah,
talking about those things like from a fictional standpoint.
yeah. I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Aggie asked, do you sometimes write based on your own dreams?
On my own dreams? No, because my dreams are crazy and nonsensical. Like last night, I dreamt about Nazis, and um, no, I don't. My dreams usually my dreams are about missing an exam, or no, my dream or cleaning the house, and the house is a mess, and I can't find anything. Like no, wouldn't
Right.
make a good book. Trust
Right.
me.
Right. The teeth falling out, late to class, all those things.
Yeah, all those
Stress
stress
dreams.
dreams. I have them all. Yeah.
Don't we all? Yes. There were there were many questions submitted about your writing process, just the process and how you layer in your suspense, whether or not you brainstorm, and if you know the ending in advance. Do you just want to kind of go through your whole process from like idea through the ends?
Sure. I'm what they call a pantser. I suspect you are too, Mary. Are you a
Yeah.
someone who just, yeah. So Mary and I would just make it up as we go. So no plan. I don't have a chart with sticky notes. I don't have a beginning, a middle, and an end. All I ever have is a beginning. And I start with my beginning, and my beginning always has to have a couple of characters and a problem or a premise. Like, this character didn't pick up her daughter at school, at daycare. So I have to have that inciting incident. And then once I have that, then I just sort of grow from there. And I always write sort of chronologically, although I admit in this one, once I'd written the first couple of chapters, I went back and I put in a prologue because I thought having a fender bender would be a really good idea. So, but generally I start at a beginning and I just do chronologically towards the end. And I don't plan, I don't know, I can't know the ending because I don't even know who the characters are. And in this one, I never know what's happened to them unless the body's on the front page. So I didn't know what had happened to her. I didn't know who the characters were. There's no way I can have the ending when I don't know any of that stuff. So I don't know how people plan. I don't get it because I don't have my characters yet. How can I know who did it or what happened when I haven't worked through the process and learned who the characters are. And basically, I'm following the story to find out what actually happened. So it's kind of like reading a book, only I'm writing the book to find out what happened. It sounds like you do the same thing.
I do. I do. I do.
Yeah.
And I love it. I do have like panic moments where I worry that it's not all going to come together. Or I'm not going to think of a twist. But there's something really refreshing about sort of coming upon that twist, maybe the way a reader would. Like I feel like if I genuinely kind of am surprised by it when it happens, that a reader's going to be surprised too.
Yeah.
And it's just like a very authentic way to get to know your characters and really like immerse yourself in the storyline and just see where it leads you. You talked earlier about if a character is not speaking to you, you'll just sort of cut them. So when you come across moments like that, or do you ever write yourself into a corner and realize like this is not working and you have to delete pages and go back? Or are you able to just go straight through it?
Almost never. And I almost never cut a character.
Okay.
I mean, it's very rare. The only time I got myself into a corner was when I was writing an unwanted guest, because that was a closed room, a classic closed room murder story. And I was just stopped. And I realized it was because the first person to die and the way they died didn't work for people to see. I'll never do another walkthrough. They're so hard. Normally, one thing leads to another and it's all fine. But when it's a locked room, you have to be aware of, who's seeing what, and so hard. Anyway, that one I struggled a bit.
Okay.
But generally, no, I because one thing leads to another, and because I'm usually juggling a number of suspects, and as I write, I know who the suspects are. I'll have 4 or 5 suspects, and I'm writing them as if they're suspects. I'm imagining them having, being involved in some way.
Right.
So it feels very authentic. And I think the subconscious just comes up with the twists and the ideas and the ending. And that's what I always find. And I find it really fun to do that. Like I really enjoy the first draft because it's so interesting. That's where that's where you're learning your story. You're finding out who your characters are and what they're going to do. And you find out what happened. And it's all really interesting. And then, when you edit, you have to go back and make the way you tell the story perfect.
Yeah.
So, but the actual story and finding out what happened, who everybody is, the plot, all that's in the first draft.
Yeah. I know so often, we talk about red herrings, obviously, in this genre. And and I'm guessing it's the same for you, those red herrings are characters that when you were writing them, they could have been the, quote unquote, bad guy. We didn't know because we were still getting to know our characters and figure out those twists and the whodunit part. So that's sort of a neat thing. It's like you're putting those red herrings in without necessarily knowing, they don't feel so intentionally contrived because we don't know that they're that red herring at that point.
I know, exactly. They're just doing stuff. And as they develop and grow, you think, oh, that's an interesting point. I didn't see that, So I love that. When I go back after I've done my first draft and I go back and I read it and I go, oh, that's planted there and that's planted there. I don't have to go back normally and put in red herrings. I don't do that. I mean, because everyone's developing as a possible suspect, I'm not planting red herrings. What I'm doing in edits usually is restructuring to best tell the story. Right. But all the motivations and the secrets, they're all there in the story.
Yeah. I love that. And I love, there's so many times that I do, like if I get a little stuck and I can't figure out where I'm going to go with something, do find that the answer is right there in the book. You've already written the answer. You just need to sort of like reposition it a different way and it'll help get you past that point.
What I do when I'm stuck, which, isn't too often, but I change points of view frequently. So every 4 or 5 pages, I'll change point of view. And I started that right at the beginning because I find if I'm stuck or if I peter out, I just shift point of view and I've got lots to say. The minute I'm in someone else's head, they're reacting to what went before. So it gives me steam to keep going. And then I switch point of view again. And it just keeps me so engaged in the story and it keeps the plot moving. Yeah. So if I had to write a book that was in one point of view all the way through, I might find it a tough slog. But that is the trick that I use. Change points of view and it helps me.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, Shari, I think we might be the same person because I said I've only written one book from one point of view. Everything else has had multiple narrators, and I've said, up until I wrote that one book, I always said I just don't think I could do it. I don't think I could write a book from one point of view.
And was it hard?
So it was less difficult than I thought it was going to be, in all honesty. And it
Okay.
might have just been that book, the way that it was sort of organized. But I was relieved to see. But I always thought I wouldn't have enough stuff for
Enough
this
to
one
say, yeah,
day. Yeah, for 350
yeah,
pages or whatever. So
yeah.
uh, yeah. So Andy asks, I thought that this was such a great question. We do events like this all the time, or we're on panels with other authors. So we get to hear about so many different authors' processes and all of that. So Andy asked, what's one part of your writing process that you feel is different from other authors?
Hmm, that's a good question. Um, well, I know there's lots of pantsers like you and me, so that's not different. What is different about? That's such a good question. I don't think I have an answer.
Yeah.
Um, I do find it difficult to come up with ideas. I probably don't. I mean, when I'm writing, I have lots of ideas, but to find a book idea, I often joke I'm lucky I get one a year, one good idea a year, and that's what it like for a premise. That's what I find difficult. I know there are some writers who have like 15 ideas a year. I'm not one of them. Um, yeah, I don't know. I find editing quite a slog, but I'm sure lots of writers do. I don't know if there's anything really unique
Yeah.
about my
Yeah.
process, to be
Yeah. I
honest.
do think it's so interesting, that authors they do have their process. There are so many different ways
Yeah.
to do it, which is just, you can have the people that write a 50-page outline before they begin, or you can have the pantsers like you and me,
Mm,
and it's just so different. But yet there are still, but then you're so similar with some authors in your
yeah.
style.
I did an event recently with Julie McAllister, and she said she writes her whole book and then throws it, like deletes the whole thing and starts over. And I've never heard of that. That to me seems
Oh,
unique. I would rather stick pins in my eyes than throw out my draft and start over.
I think so
But
too. Yeah,
yeah,
JT Ellison, I'm pretty sure it was JT Ellison told me once, this was fascinating. I had never heard anybody do this, but she writes basically as an outline, but she'll write just the first sentence of every paragraph. Or I'm sorry, the first sentence of every chapter. And that basically serves as her outline. And then she'll go back and write the chapters. And I thought that was such an interesting way to do it. I had never heard that before, but that
I've
kind of
never heard of anyone do that because I
fascinating.
wouldn't be able to think about what
Right?
happens. And yeah, because I don't know who the character. No, I couldn't do that.
Right.
That's just so weird.
um,
I'm sure some people think you and I are weird,
they
but
do. They do.
yeah, they do.
Yes, yes. And most of those people that outline then they say that they don't even stick to their outline. So we're
Yeah.
all very different and yet the same.
Yeah.
Sandy asked, in this book, was there a scene that was the hardest to write? And if so, why?
Hmm. Another good question. You guys are really smart. The scene that was hardest to write. I'm blanking again. I don't know. Like maybe no. I find I don't find anything. I kind of go in a steady Eddie kind of way, and I don't find anything. I don't have trouble with the middles. I don't have trouble with the endings. I don't have trouble starting.
Yeah.
Um, I don't have
Do
trouble with
you,
particular characters. Yeah.
you're making me jealous now.
Well, no, I don't mean to say it's easy. I'm just saying it's all the same hardness, if you know
Right.
what I'm
Is there
saying.
a part
Yeah.
you like the best, like the beginning? Writers tend to not like the middle as much, but maybe you do. But the beginning, middle, or end, is there a part that you find the most exciting?
No,
Okay.
no. I mean, I guess the thing that's probably the hardest is the beginning because I don't know anything, but I'm also most excited at the beginning. So yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
easiest or hard. And it probably just depends too on the book.
for
You know,
sure.
some books, some books I have changed the endings, for instance, or haven't been happy with the ending, or um sometimes I do a stupid thing where I write the book before I do the research sometimes.
Okay.
So then I have to go back and I go, oh, okay, that's not going to work, in real life. So then I have to sort of change something. So that's something I do that probably everyone else is too smart to do. But I'm trying to change that.
The technology these days, as it gets better and better, it makes things more difficult for us.
Oh, yes. I hate that. I mean, sometimes I think it must have been so much easier to write murder stories,
For sure.
100 years ago,
Right.
because every time, and now you write a book and the technology can change by the time it's out,
So true.
and
Right.
it's so frustrating.
Right. It's so true. Every now and then I like toy around with like setting a book like 30 or 40 years ago where we didn't have all this technology and just to think of all
Yeah,
the things that people could get away with.
I know. And
Yeah.
now they've got the DNA and everything, and you just have to sort of say, well, the police can't afford to do all the testing.
Right.
Because,
Right. You have to
you
find these
know,
excuses because otherwise the book is done in 10 pages.
like I saw a show on TV last night. It was very good, but they had a person, dragging the body and handling the body and everything. And I'm going, well, they didn't even test for any DNA on that body. And I'm just saying, well, they didn't have the budget. This is, because
Right.
that's what actually happens in real life quite
Yeah.
often, right?
Right.
So there's
Sure.
all this
Yeah.
great science, but you have to sort
Right.
of finesse it.
Yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Christine asked about audiobook narrators and if you were at all involved in selecting an audiobook narrator for your books.
Yes, I am.
And then she goes on to say that January Lavoie is the best and does a fantastic job, a fabulous job with all of your books.
I was going to say, I always insist on January Lavoie because everyone loves her so, so, so much. And she has such a huge fan club. And every time I go somewhere and if the audiobooks come up, people just say, I love January Lavoie. So I ask for her every time. And yes, she is doing this one.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
I don't think she did my first 2 or 3, but I've asked for her every time since she started.
Yeah. It makes
Yeah.
such a big difference. I don't know if you listen to many audiobooks yourself, but the narrator, they're just vital, for
Makes
the
it
listener.
huge.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, the
Because you
listeners
get
will,
you get fatigued listening to someone that you don't like their narration and it can put you right off. But
right.
boy, people love January Lavoie. I don't ever want to have anyone else.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, it's so
She's
great when you
amazing.
find somebody that you know is just right for your
Yeah.
books. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. That is great. Um, okay. I'm gonna skip that one because we kind of talked about that. Lori asked, what does a writing schedule typically look like for you? And I know that you, for the most part, have published a book a year. Is that right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
how long does it take you to finish a draft? And then like, how long till that goes to publication?
So typically I have a book out in July. So the way my year goes, it's pretty regimented, really. I start at the beginning of September, I start a new book, and then I usually get my first draft done end of January. So September, October, November, December, January. So 5 months, but I'm really only writing for 4 months because I'm doing a lot of promotion in September and then there's Christmas and everything. And then I edit from, February to, right through the early summer when I'm doing a lot of promotion for the next book. So I probably write for 4 or 5 months, I edit for 4 or 5 months, and I do promotion from the spring all through summer into fall for the book that was out the previous year. So the hardest time for me is summer because I'm early summer. I'm doing edits on the book that's going to come out the year later, and I'm doing all kinds of promotional stuff for the book that's about to come out and touring and all that stuff. So, but it's very busy. But my quietest time is probably late fall, winter when I'm writing a new draft and everyone's leaving me alone because my promotion's over. Everyone's leaving me alone and I'm just writing. And then the next section of winter and spring is editing where I have a lot more input and people. Yeah.
Sure.
And then spring, summer is just like full on chaos, crazy. Like I'm flying out tomorrow to the States and I'm doing this today. And I just got back from England. Like it's just full on and got
It's going to be
copy edits
nonstop
and
now.
whatever. Yeah, it's busy.
Yeah. Yeah,
Really
for
busy.
sure. And that's, I think, as your readers, we're very grateful that you're putting out a book a year, but it's for a writer, it's really hard, because that is not a year of writing because of course, like you say, you're writing, you're revising, you're promoting the previous book. And so it's just nonstop. And
well, you're the same, right? Don't you do a book a year?
I've slowed down a little bit, honestly. I started at a book a year, but I'm more like 18 months now. So I've slowed down just a little bit. But that's too, it's still, it's busy. And I'm guessing you feel the same, the more books that you write, you want to make I want to take like a little more time just to make sure that they really do stand apart from the books that I have written before and just
Yeah,
keep
you want
doing
every
something
book
new.
to get better.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
sure.
sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Erin asked about research and about how much time you might spend on research for a book. And I'm curious, like for this book, what in particular, what type of research did you do?
Surprisingly, a lot because I do an awful lot of research that doesn't make it into the book because I don't want to get stuff wrong. So in this one, I did a lot of research into true crime online sleuths um, who go online and have Facebook groups and talk about crimes. And I did a lot of research into that because there's that angle in the book. I set this one in Albany, so I had to do research on Albany and the cops and all that stuff. Um, I had to look at condominiums and how the cameras work and all that stuff. It's there's so much tech involved with these things because you can't. It's not a big part of the book, but you can't get it wrong, or people will see it. I'm trying to remember this book now because I've already written the next one, and the next one, which will be out next summer, and it's called Getting Away with Murder, and
Oh,
I've just finished it, and it had the most research of any book I've ever done. So it had so much research.
okay.
Um, so I'm trying to remember the research in this one, and yeah, there's a lot of true crime, um, and how just a lot of technology, like how the comments work, and how people can get into Facebook and comment on other people and all that
Right.
stuff. Because you think you know it, but then when you really look at it at a really granular level, you think, oh, do I really
Right.
understand it? Um, yeah, so
Yeah.
just psychology. I did some psychology research because I have a couple of sociopaths in there, and um, you know, just the
Yeah.
usual,
Yeah, just the usual. Just another day
usual.
of work.
Yeah.
And I do love the title for your next book. Is there anything that you're able to share, or is it too soon to talk about that one?
I can say it's called Getting Away with Murder, and it's a typical twisty, but a little different because it's set in Manhattan and Venice,
Okay.
and that's all I want to say right now. But
That's fine.
actually, yeah,
Totally
yeah.
understandable. Well, we are all very excited to read it. We'll be looking forward
Yeah.
to it next year. Robin asked about the genre, and I know that you wrote a couple comedies before you started writing thrillers and suspense. So,
Mhm.
what drew you to this genre?
Well, this is the genre I like to read and that I like to watch on TV. So I always wanted to do thrillers, and I grew up on Nancy Drew and Phyllis Whitney and Josephine Tey and everybody. But I didn't write them initially because I didn't know how to plot, and I didn't think that I could. So I wrote a couple of books, well, three actually, three comedies that were literary comedies that the plot didn't really matter, and that's how I started out. And I just meandered, and I called my first book My Plotless Wonder the entire time. And then when it was done, I realized I had a plot and went, oh, it's amazing. And then I did it again and I did it a third time. And that book didn't actually get published because I didn't actually finish with it. Um, but I wanted to write thrillers because that's where my interest is. So I decided just to try writing a thriller without a plot outline. Because, back then, Mary, I didn't know you and I didn't know Lisa Jewell. I didn't know that there were successful crime writers that didn't use an outline.
Right.
Because, in crime, like plot is so important and you think you've got to know what you're doing. But, you and I are here to tell everybody that you don't have to know what you're doing. You don't have to have an outline. And you can write a perfectly good plot that way. And so now, once I knew that, once I wrote The Couple Next Door, I thought, oh, I can write crime novels or thrillers in the same way that I wrote my other novels. So then I just switched. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you nailed it. I mean, you just do such a fantastic job with it. And I do have to say, a side note, the thriller writing community, I'm sure you feel the same. They're just the most wonderful people out there. The writers that I've been able to connect with over the years, whether in person at events or social media, it's just so great to be able to writing can be a solitary task. So to be able to connect with other people that are doing the same things and to find out it's okay not to plot out your books and it's okay not to know
It's so
something.
helpful.
Right?
Like when you're on the outside looking in, you just think, oh, I can't do this because I don't know how to plot, or, I'll never get an agent because of
Right.
whatever. Once you know other writers, everybody helps you. It's so
Right.
much, it's just completely different looking at it from the outside. It's a very, very tough thing to break into. But if you're going to be a writer, I say be a crime writer because it's much easier to break into, like to make friends.
Yeah. Oh, it
as a
is.
crime writer
It,
than as
it
another kind of
is.
writer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I think that I was not sure, early on, like what if the other authors were going to be welcoming, and I didn't know how that was going to go, and I think a little nervous and intimidated by other authors. And I mean, just everybody that I have connected with over the years is just incredibly amazing. And I think for all the aspiring writers out there, like there's no right or wrong way to do it when it comes to writing. Just write the story you want to tell, how you want to tell it. There's no perfect way.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, Tracy asked, like during your revision process, was there anything that you took out of the book, maybe at a suggestion of an editor or somebody that you wish would have been included?
No, because if I agree it should come out, then I agree it should come out. And they always give me the final decision. But usually if they say it should come out, they're right.
There's a
So,
reason.
I'll take it out. But,
Right.
I haven't really had something that, we've had a fight about. Like basically if I say I want this in, they say, oh, it's your call,
Yeah,
you know.
which is
But
great.
they will help me streamline. I do cut in I write my first draft in a very sprawling way, and then I tighten, in my edits. Yeah.
Yeah, the revision process is always amazing. I know it's hard as a writer, I think, to hand your work over to somebody else and get that feedback, but it
Mm.
always makes the book, so much better. It just takes
Yeah.
it to that next level when somebody else can get their eyes on it and have that inputs.
Yeah. One
Yeah.
thing I noticed early on was I had a lot of dialogue is one way I find out who my characters are. So
Yeah.
my books earlier would be quite dialogue heavy, so I would cut back. I would have to cut out some of the dialogue, but that's what I'm exploring. And now I don't seem to do that as much. I don't have as much wastage.
Right. You learn with every book, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, you kind of figure it
yeah,
out. And then, like, as you said earlier, you want each book to always be better than the previous one. And I think that we're just
yeah,
always growing.
yeah.
Yeah. Crystal asked, of all of your published books, which has been your favorite? And is there one that has held a closer spot to your heart than the others, and why?
Oh, that's so hard. It's like choosing among your children. Um, I don't, I don't think I have a favorite, but if I had to pick one, it would be Couple Next Door, just because that book has been so good to me. I mean, it just sold so well, and
Yeah.
it got me launched, and I feel a real gratitude for that book. And also, it was the one that I wrote as an experiment, and just I wrote it in secret, and I didn't think it was going to go anywhere. So that book means a lot to me, because that one I wrote really quickly, just as a lark, to see if I could write a thriller without a plot, and it
Yeah.
turned out really well. So I think that's the one
Yeah, I
that,
love that. It turned out really well. I mean, it's such a great book. I think
yeah,
there's something, like you said, when you're just writing it for yourself, there's no expectations. It becomes very special because you don't have that pressure, that deadline, all of
yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And then writing that second book on the contract is always so difficult, right?
That second, I mean, I think pretty much
Oh,
every author will tell you that second book is a beast.
yeah, it is a beast. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
For sure. What about like film? So Antonio says your books are so cinematic and full of suspense. Have there been any serious talks about adapting one into a film or series?
Okay, so almost all of them have been optioned. I'm a little frustrated because, nothing has come to fruition. But at the moment, I would say there's probably 7 of them under option right now of the 9. I think there's only a couple that aren't. And some options have ended and someone else has picked them up. And I've had really exciting options with Apple and things that haven't worked out. So right now, I'm just, when I first started this, I would get very excited about the options. I'm like, oh, I've got an option. And now I'm like, an option. I don't get excited because, when I get something greenlit, you'll hear about it. But I've been disappointed quite a few times with big names and big ideas, and then nothing happens,
Right,
So I've learned to focus on the books. The books are something I have control over. I have no control over these film people at all. They get
right.
very excited and then they disappear. I don't know. What about you? Like, do you have the same thing happen?
I have the
They come in all really
exact
excited.
same thing. And like
Yeah,
communication is not great. So you're always like,
yeah,
I don't know, people will ask like, how's it coming? When's that show coming out? And you're like, I don't know. I haven't, nobody's given me an update. And things that have been options and, never eventually the rights expire, and I get the rights back, and or the option expires and I get the rights back. And it's exciting in the moment to option something,
Yeah.
but it's, the number of things that get options versus the number of things that get made, it's so different.
Yeah. I think you need a ton of luck to get something made. I mean, but then you see people all the time getting stuff made and there's so much on TV and you think, that's so odd. And I think mine would be fairly inexpensive to make. They don't have big, blowing up buildings and things. So I don't know. But
Right.
I'm just here waving as a film agent. But
Right. Yeah, I know.
just
One day, because I agree that they would be amazing. They would make amazing either film or TV series. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed for you that
well,
one.
and me for you too. Like,
But to your point, for now, all we can control is the writing. So
yeah,
just I feel the same. It's just like focus on what you can control, and if it happens,
yeah,
that's amazing, and if it doesn't, that's okay too.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only way you can look at it, or you'll go mad. You'll go
Right. Oh,
insane.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Sure. What is the best? This is from Jessica. What is the best advice you ever received about writing?
I think, well, there's two. There's one I gave myself, which I think is the best, which is write in secret, because I was someone who didn't have a lot of confidence about my writing, and I self-censor quite a bit. And if I thought if people knew I was writing, it would stop me. So I write in secret. That's my advice to writers: is if you lack confidence, then write in secret and don't show it too early. Because I think the most important thing, and this is what someone told me, is you have to find your own voice. And I don't think you can find your own voice if you've got other people looking too early at your work, because we have enough inside shutting us down, shutting our voices down, that we don't need external people telling us what's wrong with it. So I think the most important thing, the only thing that's going to sell your books now, is your voice. You've got to have a style, a voice, a passion that's uniquely you, that will come out. And if you're writing to please someone else or a group, these writing groups where, I've been in them, where writing groups where everybody just wants to be the same, or else they'll all give you 12 different ideas of what's wrong with it. And, honestly, listen to yourself and find your own voice and your own way to tell a story, no matter how weird it might be. That I think is the most important thing about becoming a writer, because it's your voice that will sell the book, not it's not so much the plot, it's the voice, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
completely agree with that. I think it was a Stephen King that said, write with the door closed, edit with the door open. And I completely agree. And it's just when you're writing, when you're in that drafting stage, it should be you and your characters, and you just get to know them and you explore and you do what you want. And I feel so often that we are our own worst critics. That's something that I'm always telling aspiring writers.
Yes.
One day you will absolutely love what you wrote, and you'll read it back the next day and think it is trash and nobody should ever read it.
Yeah.
It's this vicious cycle. And so I always tell people, just get that draft down. You can't edit anything unless you have that draft down. So just try and quiet that inner voice and get that down. And I think just about every author experiences all that
Yeah.
self-doubt and everything when they're writing. So somehow you have to just kind of mute that, write your book, and then once you have your draft, I do think it's really important to get that feedback from
Yes.
other readers,
Yeah.
but know that it's subjective. What one
Yeah.
person loves, another's going to hate, and you have to decide what you're going to
Yeah.
use.
But if you're confident in your voice, then you know what's important.
For
But now
sure.
I'm remembering another bit of information. The best advice I ever got before I wrote crime, when I wrote my literary comedies, my editor, who's quite a famous writer in Canada, who won the Giller Prize, she said, "You're obviously afraid of conflict." Because she says every time you approach a conflict, you pull back from it. And she's right. Like in life, I don't like conflict.
Yeah.
But and she says in books, you have to have conflict. Well, now I love conflict. I've got more conflict in my books than anything.
Everywhere.
But it took someone else pointing that out to me. I didn't realize even in a comedy, right? You still have to have a lot of conflict, and I was pulling back from the conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so
So
interesting.
that was interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
helpful when somebody does point out those things that you have a tendency to do as a writer. I know that
Yeah.
that was I had never been part of a writers group or anything before I wrote The Good Girl, my first book, and sold it. So my editor and my agent were like the first people that were giving me true feedback, and it was so helpful to have somebody, in those first couple books, like point out the things that I had a tendency to do, so I could be really just paying attention, really aware of them when I was writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are there any authors that inspired you?
Oh, so many. I mean, in a way, like Linwood Barclay, when I read No Time for Goodbye, I thought, oh, I want to write a book like that. It was domestic. It was exciting. It was about a girl who woke up one morning and her whole family had disappeared. And it was something that I could see myself. I could do a family thing. You could see a really suspenseful kind of family story. So that kind of inspired me. And in terms of other writers, I often say Patricia Highsmith because I really like the way she gets really deep and dark into her characters and all their
Yeah.
quirky motivations. And she goes really deep. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
So I like her.
Um, we're about out of time, but I wanted to ask before we finish things for the day, where I know you said you're headed out on tour tomorrow. Where can readers find you, or where can they find your tour schedule if they wanted to try and see you in person?
Oh, okay. So the easiest thing is to go to my website, which is Shari Lapena, www.sharilepena.com. And if you look under events, it's got my whole schedule there. But I think basically I'm going to Toledo, Ohio tomorrow night. Is that tomorrow night? Yes, tomorrow night. And then I'm going to go to Plainsville. I'm going to go to Pittsburgh. I'm going to go to Doylestown. Uh, I think that's it. Maybe there's another one in there. But yeah, go to my website and look because that will have a link for tickets and all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, for those of you that got the book with the signed book plate, you should look for them in the mail in about 8 to 10 business days. And for those of you who do not order it or just need to get more copies of Shari's She Didn't See It Coming, which you should get many copies, you can get it anytime at barnesandnoble.com or visit your local Barnes and Noble store and pick up a copy or two or three. Um, thank you,
And I
Shari.
just want to say, I recently read your latest, which is coming out when?
February.
February.
February
It's Not
3rd.
Her.
Yes.
I love that book. It is so tense and I highly recommend. So out in
Thank you.
February.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I loved
Well,
it.
thank you to all of us everyone that joined us today and to all those amazing questions. I know that there were a lot of questions coming in on the chat box, and I apologize that we could not get to all of them in time, but thanks to everybody that joined us. And thank you, Shari, for a great conversation.
Well, thank you, Mary. And I'll see you somewhere out on the circuit soon, I
Yes,
hope.
I hope so. Sounds good. Safe travels.
Okay, bye-bye.
Hi, everyone.